Tap the Let Us Begin with the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill 2020. For communicating to key stakeholders, it is best to refer to this bill as the APMC Bypass Bill 2020, since that is the intent. It is worth noting that the farmers' freedom was never curtailed legally in the state-level APMCs Act. The reason why APMC statutes were brought in decades ago continues to remain in terms of exploitation of farmers and their market interfaces, and nothing much has changed on that front for small and marginal landholders of the country. The reality is that only 36% of farmers' produce gets traded in regulated markets. There were, however, restrictions on traders and buyers operating outside the mandis. While the other trade needs to be decriminalized, that cannot be understood to be deregulation. Also read, Death Warrant, Opposition slams rushed passing of two controversial farm bills. APMCs provide space for farmers for collective bargaining on price and non-price issues, grading, weighing, moisture measurement, etc. For the government, price intelligence comes from the mandis, and the government intervention in markets depends on this beyond procurement for food schemes. Implications of these bills on APMCs beyond the reforms being sought should be clearly understood. One of the key problems with the APMC bypass bill is that it leads to two parallel and very different markets with different sets of rules, wherein the APMC setup is engineered to collapse. These are markets where the traders are required to be licensed, where they are monitored, and where they pay a fee. In the new setup, the existing traders along with their commission agents are the most trade-ready. They will be the first ones who will move out of the mandi spaces and operate outside. This will obviously lead to a collapse of the mandis. Further, electronic trading like an e-Nam is riding on top of physical mandi structure in the country, not as a parallel system. If mandis are destroyed without much trading, will e-Nam happen with farmer participation as an unanswered question. Meanwhile, the new and regulated market space called the trade area will have no oversight, and the government will have no information or intelligence about who the players are, who is transacting with who for what quantities and at what prices. Having no intelligence will be a great excuse for the government not to intervene in the market. Today, the government is forced to step in when prices are seen to be crashing, especially from the mandi-based price intelligence system. It should also be noted that exploitation of farmers is not just about prompt price payment but on other fronts too, starting from price discovery itself. However, the bill looks at dispute or grievance only in this context, and even here assumes that farmers will be able to get the basic paperwork from buyers that they can use to get justice. Importantly, the bill seeks to regulate farmer-producer organizations, FPOs, which are autonomous farmers' institutions with their own internal decision-making with members. This is zealous over-regulation at a time when FPOs are in a nascent stage in this country. Regulating them is completely unnecessary. All in all, this bill does not give farmers what they need, and they are asking for remunerative prices to be guaranteed, oversight of players, transactions and prices, and empowering state governments to regulate and place all markets on a level playing field. Jira Mandi and Unja, Masana District. Photo, Ajoy Ashirwood Mahaprashasta, The Wire. Other bills. Also, it is the ECA amendment along with APMC bypass bill that will ultimately work against both farmers and consumers. We should read the bills together. This brings us to the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill 2020, which we will refer to as Food Hoarding. Freedom for Corporates Bill 2020 wants to legitimize what would otherwise be called as hoarding, without the government even having the capability of knowing what stocks are existing with who, when and where. This is being done in the name of attracting private investment in post-harvest infrastructure. Here, it should indeed be possible to create a predictable investment atmosphere for private players without the government giving up its authority to regulate. That too for protecting the interests of poor consumers and farmers. For instance, the ECA 1955 has a concept of locality and mapping of different areas with regard to existing post-harvest infrastructure, which will allow for a nuanced approach to regulation, instead of a blanket deregulation. It is also clear that extraordinary circumstances, which require regulatory powers to be with the government, will certainly have to go beyond the four listed in the bill: war, famine, etc., if food supply has to be kept smooth. And this obviously includes hoarding, which is unreasonable. Similarly, anti-competitive behavior by particular buyers in the food chains cannot be addressed by other extant laws, since regulation needs to kick in immediately for ensuring that an essential commodity like food is not affected. Further, If a situation is indeed extraordinary that requires regulation to kick in, there is no reason why non-applicability has to be included as exemption clauses on stock limits, for instance. On an export order that an MNC produces to get away from stock limit imposition, how will the government even verify if it is fake or real? The price rise triggers kept to bring in stock limit regulation are too wide for them to be relevant for poor consumers. Also read, watch, why Harsimrat Patel quit and why farmers are opposing the farm bills. Invisibilizing of stocks through this bill is a dangerous situation to walk into, which will create serious food supply problems during extraordinary circumstances. How will the government be able to even verify on the stock limits front when it has no information on who the players are, and the levels of stocks are not clear? In fact, it is unclear why a predictable policy cannot be used to regulate in a predictable fashion, rather than tinkering with the existing law. When it comes to the third bill, Farmers' Empowerment and Protection, Agreement of Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill 2020, which can be referred to for simplicity as Contract Farming Bill 2020, it has been mostly left as a voluntary arrangement between sponsors and farmers. However, strangely enough, the bar of jurisdiction of the civil court has been put in firmly, in shall legalese. Further, concepts, definitions around production agreements and farm services could very well turn out to be proxy approaches to corporate farming. It is also meaningless to peg the price in this bill to the mandi prices when mandis are engineered to collapse through another bill. Members of various farmers' organizations protest against the farm bills, in Patiala, September 18, 2020. Photo, PTI. All in all, the new bills bring in players bigger than the local traders, and it is not just local monopsonies with cartelized trade but big monopolies that can be expected now, with the government willingly giving up its regulatory powers. In the new setup, it will not only be fragmented markets with different sets of rules but also fragmented regulatory structures that will create a more uneven playing field for farmers. Ultimately, this is going to lead to the replication of old structures outside the mandi. What farmers need and are asking for is legally guaranteed remunerative prices. That the government should commit within the same legislation to maximum procurement of various commodities tied with local food schemes, market intervention from the state, agri-credit reforms to benefit small and marginal holders in particular neglected regions, as well as reforms in crop insurance and disaster compensation. It is also important to empower FPOs as enabled players in the market and keep them out of the purview of overzealous regulation. If the government is so confident that its bills are that good, it should not shy away from a proper parliamentary scrutiny of all details related to these bills. Political parties that are opposing these bills should coordinate better, keeping farmers' interests in the forefront, and not their party politics. Kavitha Kuruganti is with Asha Kizan Swaraj. Icon to edit. Tap the left.